kinds of videos. That video is a reminder to us of the power of communion, right? And it can happen just about anywhere, including at the lunch table. Today we're going to talk a little bit about tables, and I want you to meet somebody. Her name is Sarah Harmeyer. Her mom died the year before she was supposed to go off to college, and her first year of college, she kind of explains it as kind of was a very difficult time for her. She was kind of lost, didn't know what was going on, and she said she spent the year in a fog. At the end of the first year, she met with her advisor, and the advisor said, you really have to start thinking about a major. What do you want to major in? And she said, I have to tell you, I just simply want to love people. Can I major in loving people? Well, the prof said, sorry, we don't have that here. So she went on to get a degree in teaching. I think that's pretty close to loving people. She was a teacher for a while, and then she discovered, well, that's really not quite her calling. Then she went into youth ministry for a while, and she decided that's not going to work either. She finally landed what a lot of people would consider the dream job. Her dream job was fundraising for St. Jude's Children's Hospital. She worked really hard, and she worked her way right up that ladder, planning lots of galas and fundraisers and actually raising a lot of money for the organization. Now, keep in mind, Sarah wasn't married. She didn't have children, so it turned out that she was usually the first one in the office every day and the last one to leave at night. She was doing an amazing job and making a difference, a big difference for the organization. Yet, she still wasn't satisfied with her life. So she went to see her pastor, and it just so happened that church was doing the same thing we've done before at the first of the year, called a program called My One Word. And the pastor said, if you were going to live by a word this next year, what would it be? And she said, be. I would live by the word be instead of do. So the next year, she did better. She did better at being and seeking to connect spiritually, but she still was not there. So she went back to the pastor, and he asked her, well, what was it like when you felt like you were living your best life? Where were you? What was that? And she had very little time in being able to figure out what it was. She said, it's when I was in college, and I ran this little place out of the house I was renting. I called it the Red Porch Cafe. And it was a place where you could come and have coffee just about any time, and I made little food that people could eat, and if you could share something, I left little mason jars on the little tables, and people would leave money there and just kind of come in and enjoy. She said, that was really a great time in my life. When all boosters were firing, I was loving life. So the next year, when My One Word came around, she decided she wanted to use serve as her word. And so she decided she was going to invite people into her home, just like the little Red Porch Cafe. And this is where she started capturing her call. Not only that, but she decided to engage her father, who of course had lost his wife, and she said to him, Dad, can you do me a favor and make me a table? I said that to my dad once. And she said, but this table I want to seat 20 people. He said, honey, your kitchen isn't that big. You can't do that. And she said, I know, I live in Dallas. So because I live in Dallas, can you make me a table that'll seat 20, and I'm going to put it in my backyard? So she set out on her goal of serving people. And guess what? In that first year, she had an amazing adventure. She was able to serve all kinds of people. And so then the following year, when My One Word came about, she said, not only do I want to serve people, but I want to build community. She was clear and finding clarity around why God had given her life and breath and movement. She determined that she was a people gatherer. And her goal that year was to serve over 500 people at her table. It was going to be hard because she didn't know anybody in this neighborhood that she had moved into. So what she did was she sent out invitations about 9 blocks around her house. And the very first gathering, she had 91 people whom she didn't know because she was still working hard during the day come. 91 people came to that first meal. Isn't that amazing? Why? Because she invited them. That's why they came. And so this movement was really happening for her. She was feeling it. She was living life and enjoying herself. And soon this neighborhood where she knew nobody became a neighborhood where a lot of people knew one another, where they would gather for all kinds of celebrations, from Cinco de Mayo and football games to funeral meals to new babies to just, hey, let's have dinner tonight. She had a great time, but the next year rolled around and she decided, this year I need to use the word responsibility, because even though she was having a great time, she was going broke making these meals. So she decided that she would spend only $75 a month to serve at least these 500 people the next year. Now, what's amazing is when you are going to be living responsibly, she realized she had to ask other people to get involved in this, that she couldn't keep making all the food on her own. So she took a chance and said, hey, can we start doing this a little potluck style? And she said it was amazing. There were some people who would cook their family favorite recipes and bring them like crazy. There were other people who would bring Doritos. She said one little girl once brought an orange. One orange. What a beautiful offering. She said they brought food, but what I realized is not only did they bring food and eat, but they shared in stories. They truly communed with one another. And at the end of the meal, she realized that everyone was able to share and see that that time made a difference. She realized in this selfie world where we're all concerned about ourselves, that just simply inviting people over, asking them to bring what they can, be it a bag of Doritos or an orange, people have lives to share and they want to share them with you. She said she remembered how a fourth grade teacher loved her students so much. It was clear that's what she was called to do. There was an attorney who was sharing her gifts and talents with churches throughout a community that was not doing very well. She said there was another mom who had committed herself to finding non-dairy birthday cake options for kids with allergies. They ate a lot of cake at these things. She began to truly experience in a very real way the power of the Spirit and God's presence. See, what happened was she stopped planning events and started experiencing life. Because it's not about events, it's about experiences. And when you focus on experience, then God enters big time. She said she came to realize that she was good at putting on big galas and putting on beautiful things, but in some ways, Martha Stewart did her a disservice because she started focusing on the event. She started focusing on perfection in an event instead of the experience. She's been known to say that it's important for us to focus more on who is at our table and not what is on our table. It's interesting to me when we stop thinking about events and move to the place where we're experiencing life, how that little bit of shift just can transform us in profound ways. When we all take responsibility at the table, how we're all called to serve one another in one way or another. It's pretty powerful. She went back to her pastor, and actually word was getting out in the community that she was doing this amazing thing in her neighborhood. And her pastor said to her, "Do you know, Sarah, you have created a movement in Dallas. You are making a difference. You are living into who God has called you to be." And she said, "I know. I am called to be a people gatherer." She knew that was her job. And so she created this really cool organization called Neighbors Table. It's an organization devoted to the mission of people gathering. She determined it needed to be started not with events, but with tables. So she called her dad. Remember, her dad made her that first table. And she said, "Dad, I need a chair of the boards for my new organization." Get it? Yeah. So she said, "Dad, would you consider making tables for people?" And he said, "I'm in. Count me in." So together they started this Neighbors Table, a love mission about loving people. And she put out there this idea of, do you want a table and do you need a table to invite people into your home for experiences? And people said yes. Now, they weren't giving them away for free. They were asking them to purchase them and pay for the cost of all of the getting it to where it needed to be. And so these tables were not cheap. But people started signing on and saying, yes, I want one of these tables. She said everywhere from a single mom who saved and saved for that to a retired couple in Massachusetts who decided that they wanted to do this as well. Now, not only does her dad make these tables, but she delivers them and shares in the first meal experience with the community. She got a great big truck and is driving all over the country and sharing in experiences. The couple in Massachusetts, not only did she share in the meal, but for the very first time, she put her toes in the Atlantic Ocean. She said, God is alive and at work at table. We're making this too hard. God wants to touch us each experience at a time. All we have to do is accept the invitation. It made me think about the invitation that we all have been offered. And so often we say, I'm too busy. I got too much going on. I think what she did was she moved on with what Jesus left his disciples some 2,000 years ago, this communion feast that was Passover for him. But then he left this communion feast and said, friends, it's important for you to experience life. It's found in the Gospel of Mark. You've read it before and you've heard it before. Jesus gathers with the disciples the night before he is betrayed, and with his friends, he says this. He takes the bread and he blesses it, he breaks it, and he gives it to his disciples, and he says, hey guys, take this, eat this. This is my body given for you. He also takes the cup and he lifts it to heaven and he says, this is the blood of God's new covenant poured out for you and for many. Take and drink, and whenever you eat and drink, remember me. Then he goes on to say, I'm not going to drink with you again or eat with you again until we meet in heaven. Then they sang a hymn and they went directly to the Mount of Olives. So Jesus shares that story with us, and chances are, if you're here today, you're not drinking with him in heaven at a pub or wherever it might be. You're here. But you can still drink with him every time you choose to invoke his presence at whatever table you're at. Every time you choose an experience over an event, he is there. He is there. Over family recipes and Doritos and one orange, he is there. Sarah found the beautiful, beautiful image of a modern-day communion that we can all share in one way or another. It's not some distant meal 2,000 years ago. I think it's what Jesus meant when he left this meal for us. He meant to say it's important to connect with one another. It's important to have life experiences together and to commune with one another so you can figure out why God put you here. And perhaps it is to love people. In a world where we are so divided, in a church where we are so divided, I think communion needs to come back into play. We need to seek to fill our tables with people no matter what. Now, many of you are aware that I lived in Northern Ireland for a while, and one of the common practices when I lived there was hanging out in pubs. I only did it because it was a cultural thing. But what's interesting is you don't go into a pub in Northern Ireland and say, hey, I would like a table for 4. And they say, oh, wait here and we'll get one set up for you. You don't do that. You walk in, you go to the back of the room, and you sit down. And guess what? Whoever comes in next, they come and they sit down next to you. That's kind of how they fill pubs in Northern Ireland. And I think that's a beautiful image of how it is that we're supposed to be communioning together. I don't think God said, hey, wait, and I'll get a table for you. I think God says, sit down and commune. I think God says, sit down and eat. We also get way too focused on the conversation. It's about eating together. That's what's most important. eating together. In that same community I lived in, there was all kinds of conflict between the Catholics and the Protestants, and they couldn't get along. And you know what? It was finally meals that brought people together. They did not talk about religion. They didn't talk about who was going to pray first. They ate together. Now, I don't know what's happened between here, there, and now, but clearly something profound has happened because the troubles or the conflict is over. Something tells me that we need to get the table back into the center of our lives. That we need to, if you have the ability and you have the room, contact Sarah and get a neighborstable.com and get your neighbors talking. It's all about feeding one another and sharing food for the journey. And I promise you, God will do the rest. There's a beautiful video available on Vimeo right now called Hannah Cohen's First Communion. Yes, Hannah Cohen is a little Jewish girl, and I encourage you to go watch it. It's absolutely free. Hannah Cohen is this little Jewish girl growing up in Dublin, Ireland. One day she's outdoors playing when she encounters one of her classmates, all dressed in white, getting ready to go to her first Holy Communion, as she says in the video. The girls say hello, and Hannah says, "Where are you going, all dressed up like a bride there?" And the girl says, "I'm going to have my first communion." And Shannon's not here, thank goodness, our friend from Ireland. And she says, "Oh, it's a beautiful day. I get to go to the church, and I get to dress up, and then there'll be parties, and there'll be cake, and then there'll be lots of fun, and there'll be gifts and money, too." Hannah Cohen, the little Jewish girl, kind of gets excited about this and decides that she, too, wants to have a first communion. So the whole 10-minute video is her finding ways to have her first Holy Communion. And guess what? She makes it there. And what's interesting to me is, see who really shares in communion here. Is it the priest or is it Hannah? Jesus would never. He would say, "Come on. Come and have something to eat. Come and share in an experience that will change your life. Come and share in this feast with me. Come and find out why God has given you life and breath and movement. For this is not an event, this is an experience. And all who are here are welcomed, for there is room at this table." There is plenty of room at this table. At the Garden, we share in Holy Communion the first Sunday of every month. You don't have to be a member of the Garden or any church or have any particular belief to share in this feast. You need only believe that God loves you, that God has given you life and breath and movement for a purpose and a reason, and you often get in the way, and this world often gets in the way. In this feast, that darkness is taken away, and you are made new through the love of Jesus. Now, we share in Holy Communion here by intinction. What does that mean? That means you take a piece of the gluten-free bread, then you dip it into the cup, and then you return to your seats for prayer and reflection. So we'll start at the bottom and work our way up. And all it is you come up, you share in communion, much like our little buddy did in the video. You don't have to kneel. But then you come up and then just make your way back to your seats. So we'll start here and then go up and go up. I know this is new for all of us. We can do this. And just kind of turn around and make your way back up because there's some cords here we don't want you to trip on. But it's a feast for everybody. And you know, if you can't come down here, no big deal. We're going to serve you right where you are. Marcy will serve you right where you are, and she'll take care of you. So this is a profound experience where all people are welcome. On the night when Jesus was, the night of the Passover, when Jesus had gathered with his friends, he took bread, he lifted it to heaven and gave thanks to God, and then he broke it. He gave it to his disciples, his friends, and he said, "Take and eat of this, all of you. This is my body, which is broken for you. As often as you eat, remember me and my love for you." He also took the cup, he lifted it to heaven, and he gave thanks to God. Then he gave it to his disciples, his friends, and he said, "Take and drink of this, all of you. This is my blood poured out for you and for many for the forgiveness of sins. As often as you drink, remember me and just how much I love you." For these gifts, let us pray. God, we live in a busy world and we get so confused. Remind us to stop, to sit, to feast, to be made new, and to be transformed by the power of your love. Not just here today, but every day. Let us be open to experiences and accept your invitation.